Okay, thank you, Melanie, and it's good to see you guys. So today I'd like to briefly talk about my transition from a developer to the UX design profession. My name is May. Oh, is it switching? Okay, so yeah, so here are some of the some tags about me. So first, I am a UX designer, and I am also a web developer. But nowadays, I prefer to label myself as a UX designer with a web dev background or with development skills. When I say web developer, to be more specific, is about front end. So I do front end developments like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React.js, and another few tags about me is Taipei. I'm from Taipei, Taiwan. It's an island which is the origin of bubble tea. So yes, I do love bubble tea. And currently, I'm in the US. So I now live in Seattle, Washington State, because of my job. And previously, I stayed in Rochester, New York State for like 3 to 4 years for grad school and a little bit of remote job while after graduation. Okay, so here's the outline of today. Um, First, I will talk about my dev to UX journey, and then I will share some of the advantages I think of being a dev turned UX, and then we'll move on to concerns and worries of being a dev turned UX, and finally we'll have a Q&A session. Okay, so first, let me share some of my dev to UX journey. It could start with my undergrad years. So, well, in fact, when I entered college, at first my major was called Foreign Languages and Literatures. So basically, it means I learned English language and literatures like Bible, Greek mythology. But I joined an organization that managed the network in student dorms. It's called CDPA, like Campus Dorm Net Promotion Association. So at CDPA, I started to know more about information technology and finally decided to switch my major. Okay, and then at CTPA, I learned Photoshop from people there. So it's true that knowing how to use the software doesn't mean that you know how to design. And to be honest, I rarely got good grade in art classes. So it took me a lot of practice to design. But I'm not sure if should say luckily, our university doesn't have visual design related majors. So most of the visuals on campus were created by amateurs. So for student clubs, we didn't have a very high standard for visual designs. So when I volunteered to do design works for the chorus, I didn't get rejected. I joined the chorus in the freshman year and started designing for them maybe the same year or the second year, and all the way till my fifth year. So I created like digital images for promotion use on Facebook and hard copy stuff like posters and concerts programs. So I also had some experience in printing. And also I learned front-end web development. I didn't learn it in classrooms, although I majored in information management. I learned it from books and online resources. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and I previously said that I at first major in English. So the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures hosts a Broadway-style musical every year called Grand English Drama. So I was recruited to do their websites twice. So because of that, I had some experience to really develop something when I was in school that's have real users. And then I found a summer internship at Titansoft. It is a software company. I worked there for 2 months as a software engineer intern. So at that time, there were 6 engineer interns working as a team to develop an internal system for the HRs. I took most of the UI related jobs and designed most of the pages because there was not a designer at the team. So basically, like when I get to develop a page, then we don't have any design mockups to follow. So I just created by my own design. So there was once that a Titansoft employee stood on my back, looking at my screen, and asked who did the page. I said, me. And he said, I know, but who designed it? I said, still me. And he said that the layout looks very clean and comfortable. And I think it was his words that gave me a sense of accomplishment and also some confidence in designing web pages. But at that time, because I defined myself as a web developer, defined myself as a software engineer, so I felt that my design skills were helping me as a developer. And apart from learning design and front-end web development, I co-founded a startup company called Taiwan Intelligence Home, in short TIH, when I was in college. We do smart home software integration. To survive and develop, we joined some startup competitions and wrote lots of plans, met many people, talked to people, and revised our business models back and forth. So through my time running TIH, I gained some business acumen and practice explaining things to people with different backgrounds. So then after college, what's next? So at that time, I have several options. One is to work as a software engineer at Titansoft because I got a return offer from that internship. Or the second one is to continue working on TIH, my startup company. And the third one is to go to graduate school for information management. And when considering what I should do, so I think of what I like and what I want. So what do I like? I like websites. I like web pages. I like applications. And I like to think of how to make my applications easier for people to use. And I want to be closer to users. So at that time, I was a little unsure about which path I should go to because I know that I want to learn more, but I'm not sure like in which field that I could get what I want. But then I know that there's a field called human-computer interaction, and it is a field that people research on how to use technology to improve people's life in many different aspects. So then I went to grad school. So I studied human-computer interaction in the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is in New York State in the US. And during my school time, I did some school projects. So it involves like different skills or actions like observation, interviews, prototyping, usability testing, and since it's a grad school, so literature, like paper. And it was in the process that I realized that my past skills are all valuable to my current field because human-computer interaction is a pretty diverse field that people come from different backgrounds. And here we learn how to do research, how to do interviews, how to do usability testing, and how to read literatures. But when it comes to like creating a prototype, if you have the design skill, then you can create, for example, things at that time using Sketch or now using Figma, or you can create your prototype in a higher fidelity prototype, like you really code something that works, like web pages or apps. So then at that time, I realized that my profession needs to be a combination of the knowledge that I gained in grad school, plus the skills that I got from my past. After my first year in grad school, I did a summer internship at Adventrip. It is a startup team in Taiwan. And although I was an intern, but I was actually the only designer at the team. And it was my first time collaborating with developers as a designer. But to be fair, I also contributed some codes at a later phase. And I think it was because I am in a startup team that with fewer people. So even if I am a newcomer, I was labeled as an intern, but I got to propose to do a usability testing to understand what enhancements could be done in the future after I leave the team, after I end my internship. And then I graduated from IRT, then entered in the industry. So my first job after grad school was at Sustain6 as a UX designer. So it's also a startup team that works on B2B softwares. And I was again the only designer in the company. So my job is mainly about UX UI design. It's a pretty valuable experience because I got to design the products almost from scratch. And unless there was like 1 or 2 months that I also did a little programming, but most of my time there was about understanding the requirements, streamlining the workflow, and producing UX UI design. After about a year, then I joined Edifecs as an associate UX designer. It is also a company doing B2B software. We mainly do health information systems. But now the environment for me is different. So I got to work with a team of UX designers. So my job is to understanding the complex business requirements, functional requirements, and do UX and UI design. And at my current role, I don't need to code. So that's a little about my journey from a developer to a UX designer. So now I want to share my thoughts on some of the advantages of being a dev turned UX. So I think many people know that the first good thing about having a dev background as a UX designer is that you know the technical feasibility, because we know the complexity of implementing a design, so that it enables you to evaluate the value a design could bring versus the time and effort needed for this design. And then considering the time, the effort, the resources you have, you can better evaluate or decide if the design should be kept or it should be abandoned or we should keep it for a later phase. But one thing to notice is that we need to enhance our communication skills to communicate the technical feasibility with not the developers, but the other team members like the PMs or non-dev and non-UX people, because you need to let them know the rationales behind your decision of keeping the design or abandoning it. The second good thing about having a dev background is you know the developer's language. So it's easier for us to communicate with developers. And the third one is we are used to split a feature into steps because we have built applications. So we are used to creating flows, listing all the steps needed for a user to from one stage to another stage. Because we might think that it's nothing special, but from what I have observed, many people new to UX design actually struggle when doing it. Because for them, sometimes when they say, okay, I want the application for people to do video conferencing, and they jump straight to the video conferencing page. But when it comes to how user enter the system, how user get to the video conferencing page, from my observation, from my personal experience, they actually struggle to really create a flow from the beginning to the end. So since we're already able to do it, we don't need to spend time on learning it from scratch. And the fourth one is we can implement our own design. So sometimes we want to do side projects, but we cannot find a partner, cannot find a teammate. Then we are our own army of one. And you can design it and you can develop it yourself. So I think I find it very, very valuable. And I appreciate that I have the ability when I need to do something, but I don't have a partner. Yeah. And I think sometimes implementing your own design reminds you of your dev experience. So I kind of find it help me in maintaining my empathy with developers. Because when you work as a designer for a longer period of time, then sometimes you get tired of keep on communicating, like dealing with the pushbacks. But spending some time on development again kind of reminds me of the efforts needed for really creating something that works. And the last one is from my personal experience, startups prefer people who can wear multiple hats. So it's just like when startups are hiring a web developer, they would prefer who can do full stack. So we as a dev turned on UX, we can sell ourselves as a designer and a developer. So it might be easier to get your first few jobs. However, doing so means that not all your time at work will be spent on UX. So you need to remember to consider how much you love or hate coding. And also, if you will be the only designer and the only engineer after joining the team, it is highly possible that most of your time will at least be spent on development, not on design. And if what you want is a career switch to UX, this might not be what your best route. So I would not say that taking a like selling yourself as a developer and a designer is a bad thing, but you need to carefully decide which opportunity can lead you to the direction you want. And after the advantages, we want to talk about some of the concerns and worries of being a dev turned UX. So the first thing is the lack of visual design skills. So it is also what I kind of struggle and worried about a lot, because I don't have a design background and I don't have any prior professional design training. So, but here the only suggestion I have is to learn and practice, because it's a skill that we don't have. Then we can only try to get this ability. So either it is just learning like from the knowledge base, like color theory, like topography, and the other thing is about practice, creating a lot of designs. Like take my own experience as an example. When I was in college, I created a lot of designs for the chorus. So if you see all the designs, like promotion images, posters, programs, so from the first year I do it and till the last year, so it's kind of like my personal progress in design. So as a person who always suck at art classes, I think I can probably tell you that practice really helps and practice takes effect. So if you are not confident in your visual design skills, then I would say that just learn and practice it, practice a lot, then gradually you will see the difference. And of course, another important thing is to find peers or mentors for design critiques, because sometimes you only know that things doesn't look right, but you don't know why, and you might need a pair of fresh eyes to help you spot what goes wrong. And also for people who have more experience, your mentors, they might be able to give you some suggestions on how to elevate your design. And another practice that I like to share is, if you really don't know how to start, then one way of practicing your visual skill is you first find an application or a web page that you think has a very good design. Then you screenshot it, and then you open your Figma or Sketch or whatever prototyping tool that you use, and you try to recreate it without measuring the screenshot, without going to the inspect section to see the pixels of all the elements on that website. You just use your bare eyes. You look at the screenshot, you look at the screen, and then you create it in your prototyping tool. Then you compare the screenshot and your own creation to see what's different. Then you will know that how like good designs deal with their proportions, the spacings, and if there's any details that actually makes a difference but you didn't know beforehand. So I think this practice would help a lot. And another concern is not being creative. So, but for worrying yourself about being not creative, I think there are two things. One is being a developer doesn't mean that you're not creative. So if you think you're creative, then you are. You don't need to worry about other people saying like, oh, developers are just boring people or they're not creative. If you're a creative person, having a dev background doesn't make you not creative. The second thing is, if you really think that you are not creative, and then I would say it's totally okay. Because I have to admit that myself, I don't think that I am a creative person. And I think in recent years, people keep on emphasizing about creativity, and that makes me worries a lot. But in the field of UX design, so logical thinking, and yeah, I think logical thinking and critical thinking are very important abilities. So if you think you're not creative, but you think that you're a logical person, it is also your superpower. Because especially in like enterprise software, where we focus less on the visual impact, but more on providing a smooth workflow and about displaying lots of data, about streamlining task flows. That is our battlefield, I'd say. So this is where you can utilize your superpower, and then you understand that your logical thinking and critical thinking skills are very, very valuable when it comes to dealing with complex requirements. So if you are not creative, then you're just not creative. That's okay. You have other superpowers that enables you to become a great UX designer. And another worry that a dev turned UX often have is, am I a traitor? Like, am I a failure for transitioning my profession from dev to UX? Especially for women in tech, because there are fewer women in tech compared to men. We all know that. And if you are first an engineer and then you want to transition, you want to switch to UX, then sometimes your peers or yourself would be thinking, oh, so I am another woman leaving tech. I mean, leaving the dev role. So it makes me feel like a traitor. And also, some people feel that switching from dev to UX is a downgrade. They feel that, oh, it's because I cannot ace a dev role, so that I want to go to do UX. But I would say switching from dev to UX is definitely not a downgrade. Because if you take, for example, a senior software developer, senior software engineer, can they do a great UX job? No. So that means that from dev to UX is not a downgrade. We need different abilities, different skill sets on dev and on UX, although there are some overlapping, but it's just two different tracks. So I would say try to free yourself from this curse, because everyone has a freedom to do a career change. So you do too. So you're just making a career switching decision for yourself. You're not a traitor. And another worries that people often have is thinking your previous life as a developer is wasted if you do a career change. But I would say that we learn many skills and gain experience valuable to our UX career from different phases in our life. Because take myself as an example, I learned not only programming, but also agile, communication, and project management before starting UX. Because I learned those like in school, in internships, in side projects. So I think all these experience and abilities all contributes to my current UX career. Okay, so my only suggestion to people who wants to become a UX designer, or especially from a dev background, is before deciding whether you need a degree or bootcamp or anything, the first thing is to evaluate your current skill set. Because I think it's the same for UX. Like you cannot, when you want to start a project, you cannot jump straight into creating the screens. You need to first understand what's the current situation, what is the expected result. Then you could evaluate like how far you are away from your goal. So it's the same for a career switch. So before deciding whether you need to go to grad school, need to go to college, you need to go to bootcamp or buy any online courses, I would suggest first evaluating where you are now. And then you can see what other skills you're lacking or experience you're lacking, and then you can make corresponding efforts. Okay. So I think I maybe a little too nervous. I spoke too fast. So we can start a Q&A here. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Thank you for doing that. And don't worry, I mean, we all get the jitters sometimes. I do. I'm always nervous, even when I'm online with all of you folks. I do this regularly, but I'm always nervous, so don't worry about that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, does anyone have any questions for our speaker or any comments? Feel free to unmute your mics if you prefer to use your mic, or you could use the chat as well. Okay, so Amber says thank you, and they said it was pretty informative. Ashley is sending you happiness and love. That's so cute.
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Ashley.
It seems like Amber wants to know if the slides are going to be shared. Do you feel like
I can do that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Feel free to drop the link in the chat if you want to. Otherwise, you can send it to me and I can distribute it to everyone else later.
Okay, I can export it to PDF after the call, and then I can send a link. On which channel should I send it to?
You could, well, you could send it to the Designers Talk channel because that's usually revolved around like UX talk. Or you could
Okay,
send it
cool.
to me, and I could also like send it out to everyone on our announcements channel.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I have some follow up questions because I'm
Hmm.
pretty interested in your kind of transition from being a developer to a UX designer. And I think you made a very good point and a valid point that UX kind of requires all different types of skill sets. However, when it comes to job searching and stuff like that, are there certain types of roles that you tend to look for that are kind of aligned with your interests? And I'm also kind of curious to
Hmm.
know how you go about doing that.
See, so so I would say from the reality part, because I am an international student,
Mm-hmm.
so my first job searching stage was pretty chaotic because I graduated during COVID, so you know the market. so um, so it was really chaotic. So I was like, I would not suggest doing that. But at that time, I was so desperate that I almost applied to everything I can see. But from if to look on what opportunities I get, like where, like what kind of roles that would offer me an interview or would call me, um, usually startups, and especially when they have like dev needs. For example, I was a little frustrated at that time that on I think the first call that I got after graduation is a UI developer role. So I was like, oh, so I I applied to so many UX designer um, positions, and the only call I got was for a developer role. But continuing my job searching journey, I would say that at that time, because of my limited experience and because of my skill sets, uh, I find more opportunities within the startup field. So, because I have dev experience, I if they need to kind of like allocate their human resource to reflect to their current need, that I can do both. So if they need more design, they put me on design. If they need more dev, they put me on dev. So I find myself having more opportunities in startups. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the startup space, it's sort of like what you said. They're looking for people who have multiple kind of skills. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of know from just like from talking to and also working with other startup owners that like I think when it comes to getting rounds of investments, sometimes they're trying to keep a tight team together. So it's super important for them to have everyone on board that has the right skills to kind of like work towards their goals. So I totally see how that makes sense. And also when it comes to the creative risk that startups have, sometimes they're trying to come up with disruptive technology or new ideas. So they tend to want to look for people who are kind of similar minded, like creative and ambitious. So yeah, I definitely agree that like working with startups can also be like a great starting point for a lot of people's experiences where you could just spend your first years working with a company that just doesn't have um, everything developed in terms of what they're looking for in a designer because it's a role that you could also like grow into if that makes sense, right? um,
Yeah, definitely. And also, I want to add one point is that when you're working in a startup team, uh, when when it is a like a smaller scale startup team with just a few people, when the team is small, then you usually could create bigger impact on the team or on the product. So it and usually there's not a very structural process when it comes to doing anything new. So it would be easier for you to propose doing research or doing some exploration. Because if you're when you work in a mid-size or big company, then sometimes it would be harder for you to really reach out to users or clients or doing anything that is not within their day-to-day process.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that because I've had a few experience like freelancing with startups as well, and I find that the fact that there is less structure is a little bit risky because if you're a new designer, you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't know like what to do next. However, if you are very like analytical and you try to approach problems with um, trying to do as much research as possible to kind of validate certain ideas that you have, it could also be a great kind of position where you could do a lot of good for a company. So yeah, totally agree that like the creative freedom and also the risks and also the fact that you might be working with a small team where people have a little bit more belief behind your skills and stuff like that could also be great for your career and your growth. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. As for
yeah,
corporate,
yeah.
this is just my
Mhm.
opinion, but it's like I've worked in corporations before, and the structure can be good because if a company as large as like Facebook or Google, they already have like a tight system in place. You can kind of learn from the most experienced people working in those kind of organizations of like how to maintain things as usual. But if you are kind of starting off as a junior designers, it's like a lot of these jobs are like meant for people with senior skills. So it definitely can feel a little bit alienating when you're trying to apply for design roles. You feel like, oh, maybe I can work at Facebook or Google, and you find out all of these jobs have extremely high expectations. It could be a little bit soul crushing.
Good point.
Mm.
And I think working in startups is like oh it kind of slips my mind. Sorry.
It's okay.
I see a question on in the chat. Do we need to do a certificate or can we find a UX UI job directly with our software engineering background? Um, I would say for UX design career, like UX design related positions, um, what you need is usually your portfolio. So there I don't think there's any like hard requirements when it comes to certificates or um degree in a specific background, although usually they will list their requirements as saying like they want you to have at least a bachelor degree in like visual communication design or a human computer interaction or any related um related field. But what matters more is your portfolio. So your portfolio needs to demonstrate your ability in doing research and design, in doing iterative prototyping, in on understanding and analyzing the issues and finding the pain point, and how you approach the pain points to um, find a solution and evaluate the solution. So I would say there's no hard requirement when it comes to certificates or educational background, but you definitely need a strong portfolio for you to land your job. Mhm.
Hopefully that answered their question. Oh, they said thank you. That's good. Um, we also have another question from Ashley. Do you want to read that one?
Yeah. Would you say, as a dev background, it was easier or harder to understand UI information architecture? Uh, my first reaction is to say yes, but then I would say I'm not sure, because for me, I personally would say that having a dev background, having my experience working on like websites, web pages, that help me understand, make it easier for me to understand information architecture. But I've also seen developers who would think that, okay, so as long as they put all the required information on the page, then it's enough. So I would say it depends. It's not necessarily easier or harder for a person with a dev background to understand information architecture.
Yeah, I kind of feel like information architecture would be in the domain of expertise of front end devs. Um, it is like what front end developers would have to work with, so I would think those two things are related, are they not? Okay. Seems like there's some more questions coming in.
Okay, before the question comes in, I finally remember what I wanted to say
Yeah,
previously.
sure.
So
Go ahead.
yeah, so I mentioned that when joining a startup team or a startup company, that you could create a bigger impact on the product, on the service, or the company. But also, I want to mention one thing is that you need to first earn people's trust to really do something maybe bigger, because when when the team feel concerned or hesitant about your proposal, it doesn't mean that they doesn't value, for example, research, or doesn't value on UX. But it's more like, imagine you're running a project, and you with a few people like you already worked with for a long time, and suddenly a new person joined, and they propose to do something that would maybe cost a little, and then you have never done it before, and you're not 100% sure about the person's ability in doing that, that raises concern. So I would say you would need time to understand the team, understand the culture, the people, and understand the product. And after your observation and working with the team, then you will know if you can propose to do something, or what is the better way for you to propose it. So, because I think working as a UX designer in a team, it often involves earning trust from people. Like, you need to build a trust relationship between your teammates, team members, cross-functional teams, so that they understand that when you say something, usually it's valuable, or because you see some concern, it's not someone just trying to be loud and trying to show off themselves. So I would say earning trust is a very, very important step when you want to create an impact.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that statement. And um, I also think that when it comes to communication and delegation, this is just from my perspective of talking with other UX designers and also researchers, which is stakeholders also don't have a lot of knowledge of how things work. So, the job of like being a good communicator is also making sure that people who don't have the same level of knowledge are on the same page and understand what you understand, which I think is like really hard to do if you've never done it before. I don't know how you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I see a new question on, have you noticed a difference in the support you get from management as a developer versus as a UX designer? I ask because design work is often treated as just pretty work. Mm, More like a yes and no. So from my experience, sometimes if you're in a more like dev-oriented or dev-centered culture, then you'll find out that even if you created the design and got approval, and then when the dev team push back, and they would just say yes, yes, yes to all of their pushbacks. So it happens. But I think what we can contribute here is to understand the reasons of those pushbacks, and to, of course, understand the reasons of those designs, and then you could decide, like, evaluate the importance of the design, and then to see if you need to, or if you want to, defend some of the designs to be implemented. So when you need to do that, then communication is very important, and also you need to make sure when you're creating the design you have a rationale. So I would say yes, it often happens, but sometimes our job is not just about creating the UX design, but also include letting your team know, letting your company know the value of UX. So it sounds a little big, I know, but I would say it's pretty important if you want to work in the company for a longer period of time, and you really want to make the team or the culture or the company, the products better. So when you do your design, make sure you have a rationale instead of just it's because it's pretty. And then when you got pushbacks, you need to explain your rationales behind those designs. So that it depends on in your organization who can make the call. But for example, if it's the PM who can make the call to put it into development or to hold it or to abandon it, then you need to make sure you explain it clearly to the PM about why you did the design and what's the possible impact if we don't implement the design that way. Okay, and I hope it answered your question. Thank you.
Very good. And I also have another question for you. It's more about um, when it comes to applying different types of skill sets and learning a new skill. So, for example, with front end development, I've never been a good coder myself. I just know the basics of HTML and all that stuff. But is there value in trying to develop skills in front end development? Because I remember what you said about, like, oh, practice is good, but then I also think to myself, how long do you have to practice before you get good at something, right? So, what's your
Yeah.
perspective on this?
Wow. It's a big question. So to say in general, I encourage all the designers who, for example, who work on web design to learn a little about web development so that you know that's what you're designing for. I mean, of course, we design for the users, but if you're designing the web services, then I would say learning like HTML and CSS would be very important, because you will know how those fancy things happen, like how people make those designs into reality. It's just by those codes. And I think if you have the experience in really creating, for example, a website, then you will. I think it helps to understand the structure of web pages, because HTML is like a markup language with pairs and pairs of tags, and I think it helps me to in understanding web structures. And also by learning CSS, you will understand how those visual effects be implemented on web pages, and then you will find the limitations of CSS. Because I personally had an experience that I wanted a, let's say, a box or a card. I want a card to have a gradients border, and it happened this year. And I thought, okay, I just created a gradient border. I did it in Figma, but when I really coded, then I realized that you cannot have a gradients border using CSS. I was shocked, but I would say really learning HTML CSS would help you understand the structure and help you understand some of the limitations. But because we are just like, we want to gain the skill because we want to help our UX job. So we don't need to expect yourself be like very, very professional in front-end development. And also because of it, so when you have some design that you are not sure if it is technically feasible, I think you can just take it to ask your developers in the company, because they usually will have more experience in dealing with this. So sometimes you think it's not possible, but maybe they will say, yes, it's okay, we can do that.
Absolutely. I think, in my experience, like, I've worked with a lot of developers, and I find that, like, communicating with them and making sure that the team that you're with can manage the kind of design changes that you're requesting is really important. So listening, understanding, and just being conscious of what you're designing, as well as like what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to do, is also very important. The only thing that I find is missing is the kind of technical and nuanced information, like working with databases and working on the back end. That stuff, I'm sort of like, I could follow examples on the internet to set up MySQL, but I don't really know much about it that I could actually explain it in full detail. Do you know what I mean? So that's a case where I'm just like, how deep should designers really go when it comes to learning development, for them to be effective at what they do, and also to kind of, I guess, improve their skills in being a UX designer. I'm kind of curious to know from your perspective.
Yeah, so if not considering the reality, I would say if you know more, it's of course like better and make you more capable of evaluating things and understanding the scenario. But in reality, I think it's not very practical to expect designers to learn everything, like the backend stuff and also the database. And it would be good, like, because I learned some like database and query concepts in undergrad years in college, so I do understand some of them, but I don't think for designers it's a must, especially we could like in this company we might be designing like web services. In other company we might be designing like apps, or even like physical stuff or voice interfaces. So I don't think it's very, very practical to say we want to prepare ourselves in these aspects. But I would say if you have a general UX skills and some understanding, and then when you, for example, when you need to, as you said, like understanding some of the database, maybe communication or how they store things, or why can't we load all these information together on this page, then I think it's the time when you encounter it, then I think it's the time for you to maybe learn a little about it. But I would not say that you need to learn a lot of things just to think that you are prepared for all the opportunities. because I don't think there will be a day that you are like fully prepared and you understand everything.
Got it. Makes sense. Thank you for that. We also have another question. We'll take up like one or two more questions and then we'll wrap it up. So Ashley says, um, also to make sure that design slash research slash writing slash information architecture is not overstepping or offending devs. I
Mm,
think it was in whilst we were talking, they had this comment, so it must be related to what we're talking about with communicating with devs. Um, I'm not sure if I understood the question, but I'm trying to. Okay, so I'm trying to process it as um, designers should be concerned about um, they're not overstepping the boundaries of their role, right? So it's sort of like the question that I had, like how much should designers know, and like how much, I guess, weight is on their decisions of, I guess, implementing a design, or um, how far it is that their knowledge should reach if they are in a particular role. I think that's okay. I'm sorry if I made that confusing. I was trying to like work out what they meant, but Ashley says that it was correct. So I think it's on the lines of designers shouldn't have to be overstepping their boundaries, right? So they don't necessarily need to know all the detailed requirements for development. Just as long as they have like a general understanding of it, that's enough for the role.
mm, I would say that you need to have enough information to make you comfortable doing UX design. Because if you don't feel comfortable, like if you don't think you have enough information for you to do UX design,
Mm.
then when it comes to design decisions, like you just can't be very confident because you don't really know what you're doing. So I would say you don't, of course, you don't need to know everything, but you need to have the enough level of information to make you comfortable with what you're doing and know what you're doing. To make sure you're not exceeding the role. Uh, so I would say just like we don't want PMs or developers to say, okay, make this button green and put it on the top right corner. So we should not tell the developers to code this way. But
Yeah, I suppose.
and
Oh yeah, sorry. Go on.
yeah, so because when thinking of if there's any time that I'm worrying about I exceed my role and maybe stepping on the developer's foot is um I don't really think I have that time. It's more like when they say because of for example, because of the UI library we're using, so like this effect we cannot do it. But when I go to see the library, like the documentation, and I think it's doable, then I would take it and discuss with them or with the PM and saying this. I think this is undoable because of XYZ, and you're not saying you need to communicate this in a form that we are working together to make this product successful. We need to avoid making like, why did you say that you cannot do it? You're a liar. You're just being lazy. No, we cannot do that. We need to make sure that we are working together toward the same goal. And well, the research we did, for example, on the documentation, is just saving their time because developers also have a lot of work to do. So maybe they look at the library documentation and think, okay, it looks like we cannot do that, but maybe just with a little tweak, we could actually implement that effect. So I think first, of course, we don't want to tell the developers, oh, so just code it this way. And the second thing is when you're doing research or when you're communicating that is about design and implementation and developments, then you need to be very careful about your communication. You want to make sure that you remember that you and the developer and other people, you are in a team. You're in the same team. So we are working together to make things happen. We are not here to criticizing anyone that for not able to do being not able to do something. I think that's my take on if it answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I totally agree with you on that. That like when you're in a role, I think depending on every company, because every company is going to be a little bit different, especially with startups, and depending on the maturity of the team as well, because it's like what you said, like some teams may not have a full understanding of UX, so they don't really know what the right processes should be, whereas some teams with more experience they probably do. And then when it comes to delegating decisions, it's never going to be just one person overriding what everyone else says. I think there's a bit more communication and collaboration amongst development and design before decisions are actually made. Um, but of course, every company is a little bit different in terms of like how often there's back and forth between stakeholders, developers, and designers. But um, I guess the question of overstepping is really just about, I guess, communicating expectations. So if you are in a new UX role, I think it makes sense to uh, talk to whoever you're supposed to report to and make sure that like you are delivering on what is expected and what is asked of you. And if you are making suggestions that if they do shoot you down, let's just say that you should be able to freely ask for like reasons why, or at least be involved in the conversation so that things are not kind of being done without your knowledge or without your understanding either. So yeah, that's how I look at it at least.
Yeah, and I would like to add one point is that when you are a developer, it's a stereotype, but it's sometimes people use this stereotype to kind of protect you. Is that people think developers are not that good at communication, not that good with people. So when you like accidentally offend someone, and other people will tell the person like, oh, he or she is actually a nice guy. He didn't mean it. It's just he or she is not good at communication. But when you switch your role to a UX designer, then people expect you to know how to communicate. And so I think when you become a UX designer, you need to put more cautious. You need to be more cautious when you communicate. So I think there's a saying like respond, don't react. So when you need to communicate something, you need to step back, think about it, and think how to make your communication effective. Instead of just you thinking that you're saying the truth, but the way you say it, the way you form it, might create very big difference.
Mm. Oh, you know what? That kind of reminds me. There's this book that I've read. It's called. The title of the book is very funny. It's called Surrounded by Idiots, but it's actually a very good book. And yeah, I think it's by like a Swedish author. They're like really known in the business world, but it's really about a book about communicating. And if you read it, it's translated in multiple languages, so definitely look it up if you haven't heard of it. It kind of breaks down like how do you communicate to certain types of people, and what is it that certain types of people expect from communication. It can help in business because if you don't know how to talk to your boss, or you don't know how to talk to certain colleagues, like people have different personalities and they have different expectations from communication. So if you're talking to someone who is very like performance oriented and they're very analytical and they're not very much interested in dealing with people's emotions, you might have to present information in a certain way so that they're more likely to respond to it in a positive way, and also to learn to understand your own personality and understand like how it is that you expect what you expect from communication as well. I found it really helpful because I also struggle with this. So I don't know. Like, I have two older brothers that were in tech as well. They're both into IT, and the stereotypes of developers being a little bit egotistical, it sometimes is true for some people, but not all people, right? So, understanding that there are different types of people who are less interested in, let's just say, emotional reciprocity. It doesn't mean that they don't have any emotions or empathy for people. It's just they look at information from a different perspective, and they may not take points of emotionality as being valid, whereas there are other people who see the emotional side as being very valid. So knowing who you're dealing with kind of helps, and then knowing how to deal with that so that you have understanding from both sides is like ideal, especially in business situations where you definitely don't want to be argumentative or fight with people, but then you also don't want to find yourself not being understood at the same time. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, totally agree with that, because I think it would be more effective when you communicate to the person in a way that it's easier for them to understand or to accept it. Because yeah, as you said, like different people have different personalities, or they're used to different ways of communication. So if you approach them in the way that suits them the best, then it will be the most effective way.
Okay, so Ashley says, uh, can you post the title of the author? Surprisingly, there are many on this topic on Bezos' website. Really interesting. Yeah, I think I could find it. Let me see if I could find it, because I definitely do have a title, a copy of the audiobook. Oh yeah, so it's by Thomas Erickson. Let me just see if I could find. Yeah, it's on Amazon definitely, but you could definitely find it anywhere else, like a local bookstore. If you don't want to buy it from Amazon, it's totally fine. But there you go. Other than that, that's all I have to say for now. I know we're almost like a little bit over time, but do you guys have any more questions or any more comments for May? No? Okay, so with that being said, I know it's sort of repetitive, but I have to remark that we are on YouTube. Uh, we have a newsletter as well. If you want to follow us, please follow us. And also, if you are considering donating to the Collective Studio, please do that, because it helps us to raise money to pay for the software that we run for our design sprints. It helps us to keep our website online. So if you find value in the kind of events that we create here, please consider donating. It helps to keep this community free for everyone. And also, if you want to sign up to our newsletter, feel free to do that, because we'll be able to communicate with you on when we have new events as well as design sprints. So definitely check out the links that I posted in the chat. And May, do you have any links for anyone to kind of connect with you on LinkedIn or on social media?
Cool. Yeah. So I open to any chat or like friend request on LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn, just before you send a connect request, make sure you send me a message, because there are too many like fake accounts. I cannot differentiate them. So if you DM me and saying that, oh, you know me through the Collective Studio, then I will accept it, and feel free to ask me anything, or yeah, just anything on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just kind of curious. Do you have a link that our followers can find you on?
Yes,
On LinkedIn?
let me get the link.
All right, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. And hopefully you'll check out the links that we supplied, and also check out our announcement channel or the Designers Talk channel for the slide deck. With that being said, thanks for being here. Uh, See you the next webinar. I don't know when. It'll probably be in the next year. But yeah, enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy whatever. Thank you for being here, and bye bye.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Yeah, no problem. Bye bye.